Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. Thank you very much for attending on this beautiful December the 17th. Almost Christmas time. Happy holidays, everyone. First item on the agenda today is the approval of minutes of October 15th, please. Thank you, and I'll call that question. All those in favor? Anybody contrary-minded? Unanimous vote. Thank you. And next, we'll move into another one of our Growing in St. John presentations. Very, very excited. Mr. Willett, are you going to introduce? Okay, thank you. We'll turn it over to our Deputy Commissioner of Growth and Community Development, Mr. Ville, who is also a exceptionally good rock climber, everyone. So we're going to add just background to everybody's introductions today. So, Mr. Willett, over to you.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, to the committee. I'm very pleased today to be doing another introduction on this Growing in St. John segment. Today we are very lucky to have Percy Wilbur with us to share a little bit about his story. Percy's been in St. John since 1989, and since that time, and you'll see in both a video and what he shares with you today, that his entrepreneurial spirit, his business acumen, and his passion for the community has made an impressive and lasting contribution to the city and the city's economic growth. As a member of the Growth and Community Planning and Growth and Community Development Services team, we have worked with Percy on several different projects through the years, and it is a pleasure to work with Percy. Very well prepared, and somebody that staff do look forward to work with when he comes in with his new ideas. But listen, I don't want to take too much time on this introduction. There's this great video that Develop SJ put together. It's only 1 minute and 27 seconds that I wanted to show to you before Percy comes up and gives his presentation.
Just steps away from the St. John City Market, we're going to get a look inside a restoration project that's adding to the vibe of uptown St. John. I guess you could say it's like a work of art.
Hello, I'm Percy Wilbur, and we're standing here at the corner of Charlotte and Union Street, and this is my latest project. It was built in 1867, the year of Canadian Confederation. Come on in.
I'm Sarah Jones with Jones Gallery. My brother and I are thrilled to be part of the resurgence happening here on Union Street. There's lots of great energy in this neighborhood, and we're so pleased to be part of it.
Building's 152 years old. Nothing's plumb, nothing's square. The floors weren't even level. Those are the challenges. So here we are on the 3rd floor. We're in a 2-bedroom apartment, a little over 900 square feet. Very large, spacious rooms. All the apartments come with washer, dryer, fridge, and stove. This was just a ratty old piece of plywood covering this up. We tore it out, and this is what we found underneath. So we highlighted it by putting spotlights on it. We painted it gold. This is one of the original walls that we had repointed, about 3 feet thick. Kept the heritage of the building incorporated in the architecture.
Expanding or planning a bold new development? Reach out to Develop St. John. We're getting deals done.
Okay. Looking at that video, I think I could use a little rock climbing myself. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm really flattered that you're interested in my story and how I got to become a developer here in St. John. So I was originally born and raised in Bathurst, New Brunswick, but I came here via Germany, whereas in 1989, where I was posted with the Canadian Army Engineers. So I came here to go to school at UMBSJ. And not being from here, nor knowing many people from here, I had little hope of seeking summer employment with a big employer. So I made up some business cards on a snowy March break in 1990, and I went door to door offering to do odd jobs for St. Johners to help put myself through school. By the time I finished my March break, I had my summer work calendar filled, and this continued year after year until I graduated in 1993. And upon graduation, my business was promising, and I enjoyed business quite thoroughly. I also enjoyed living in St. John, and so much so that I had set myself a 5-year goal. And if I achieved this, I would stick to business rather than seek further education. And needless to say, I achieved my goals. Before long, I decided to start a garden center business, and this business would help feed my landscaping business. So I bought the 10 acres in Milledgeville, the former Reynolds Garden Center, as you would remember, Ms. McLeary. And I built the Wilbur's Garden Center in 1996. And I added an additional 15 acres of land from various owners through the years, which gave me a total of 25 acres. At that point, I decided to put down roots in St. John, and I wanted to live in St. John, but I wanted to live on the river without having to leave the city. And so I found a 10-acre parcel in Milledgeville, next to the Milledgeville Ferry, that's now referred to as Brigadoon Terrace. I developed 11 high-end waterfront water view properties and kept a couple for myself, which I later built homes on and lived. All the while, I still had the 25 acres in Milledgeville, and I decided to develop that into commercial townhouse and multifamily properties. While developing that parcel, a group from Halifax approached me to purchase it, and we came to an agreement, and I sold it. I then purchased 700 Millage Avenue, which is across from the Milledgeville Irving. It followed the same pattern and eventually became the Shanix Retirement Complex. I then purchased 12-unit strip mall in McAllister Industrial Park, which the owners were struggling with. Upon filling it with tenants like Praxair, Coca-Cola, and such, I began to purchase 13 acres at the entrance to the park for additional strip malls at 1175 Bayside and 1185 Bayside. More recently, while sticking to development, I decided to focus on unsightly and challenging properties that are within the city core. The city produced a hit list of properties that would be torn down if not repaired. This is when 1 Charlotte Street got on my radar as it looked like it was about to be demolished. It was a pet project of mine and an education lesson to learn about the apartment building business. The city's enthusiasm and support for the development in the city core was so great that it inspired me to embark on my biggest project yet at 95 Wentworth Street. The new project at 95 Wentworth is going to have approximately 83 high-end apartments ranging in size from 1,000 square feet with 1-bedroom units to over 2,000 square feet with 2-bedroom units. It'll have a 2-level underground parking garage with car washes on each floor, charging stations for electric vehicles, dog wash stations, a bike repair station for cyclists, a gym, a spa, and a meeting/community room. The recent generation of St. John developers and overwhelming support and enthusiasm from city staff and council, combined with incentives and departments like Develop SJ, help encourage development investments and growth in our city. I think there is a new feel for living uptown in St. John, and if we give folks choices in safe, comfortable environments, they will come if we build it. Of course, St. John has great people, culture, and amenities, but what makes St. John unique is the lifestyle and cost of living, and I would argue it's leisure. Everything is within a 10-minute drive. Traffic is never an issue unless you hit a red light. The St. John and Kennebecasis rivers are jewels that should be developed and showcased, as is Rockwood Park and the Irving Nature Park. Thank you for your time.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Wilbur. Thank you, Percy. Questions, Councillor McKenzie?
Thank you,
Questions,
Worship.
comments? Yeah.
Well, just a comment. Like, Percy, I've known you for a long time, and everything that you touch, really, you do a magnificent job.
Thank you.
There's no halfway with you.
Yeah, thanks.
And, I appreciate when we can restore an older building, and I know whenever your preference is to try to restore and everything. But, man, I fully am looking forward to this new development on Wentworth Street.
Thank you very
You
much.
know, it's too bad, you know, you can't save every church, every old building, but the ones you can, that's great. And the ones you can't, you're going to make it really something else down there. I mean, we talked about it, and I look forward to it. It's just going to, we see the Irving garage right behind that. You're going to be doing this project. I think it's just going to be a wave across the Southern Peninsula.
I agree.
I really appreciate everything that you're doing.
I appreciate your
in a
help.
big
You're
way.
you're always there when I pick up the phone and call you and text you. And yeah, we've been friends a long time. And Mrs. McAlery, gosh, she's been holding my hand and walking me through this process since 1990.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job, and we really, really appreciate what you're doing for St. John.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thanks. Well, Percy, I don't know if I've been holding your hand, but, you know, when you showed some of those pictures of your buildings out east and all that, kind of brought back a lot of memories of when you were going through all those jobs. And you're very determined. I think you're one person in St. John that deserves a lot of credit because you wanted to do something, you had a dream, and you worked very hard at it.
Thank you very much.
And you've, from the very beginning, I remember way back when I bought a tree because I won an election and you came and planted the tree on my front lawn. So I don't know if you remember that, but you had a
I do,
cedar crest
I
then.
do.
So you've been around Milledgeville for a long time. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for everything you do and keep up the good work. And I know that you'll do very well. And this project that you're on now is going to be a success.
Thank you.
Okay, all the best
I
to
hope
you.
so, too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hickey?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks very much, Percy. I know certainly one thing we're always assured of when you take on a development is quality. You know, even in your development in Milledgeville in your new house, my parents are your neighbors. It's nice to see
Okay.
that there's a house going up without vinyl siding on it. So that's always great to see a testament to quality there. I guess my question is, you know, we've had a lot of concern brought forward from the public about things like the loss of the Gothic arches and things like that. And obviously, you know, it was sad to lose such an important building in the city, but there were certain concerns around it that obviously that this was the decision that was made. I guess my question is, how do we moving forward as we develop the uptown, as we see growth taking place, how do we find that balance between maintaining our heritage and making sure that that is a distinct part of the reflection of our uptown culture and the reason for our vibrancy and growth, while being able to consistently grow sustainably? How do we protect and find that balance from your perspective?
That's a really tough call. I think you folks struggle with it all the time. You did come up with that hit list. That's what got me to step in and be interested in what can we save in the city. So other than that, it's a tough call. I think it's demolition by neglect. People will buy a piece of property for nothing, a nice historical piece of property, and do nothing with it. And it doesn't take very long for it to fade into oblivion. And then you have no choice but to demolish it. The church is a fine example. You know, it was neglected for 20 years. And weather just causes havoc to these old structures.
Yeah, and I think what'll become important, you know, and in particular with the Gothic arches, you know, the tragedy there was the neglect over the last 20 years, not the tear down. It was what put it to that point. And I guess what will be critical for us is making sure that as we grow as a community, maintaining the diversity of our heritage buildings will become critical, and in effect, identifying the buildings that need to be saved, right? The buildings that are 20 years out from being neglected and are approaching that, but can still be saved in the long term.
If you look at the recent sort of generation of developers like David Elias and Gary Spicer and Keith Brito, my God, I mean, they're saving buildings every day by repurposing them. And so it's just different generation of developers.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's good to hear, and I'm glad you're on that train too. That's really good. So thank you very much.
It's not easy sometimes.
No, I can imagine.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So thank you very much, Percy. As a reflected, thanks for sharing all the details. I was aware of most of those. I think we are here. Thank you for your compliments today of our team, because when I think about how we've arrived here today, certainly as a candidate, for mayor, growth was one of the big themes for me. This council embedded growth as an absolute priority in its the bookend between growth and fiscal responsibility and its priorities. That led to a whole new conversation and discussion within the city, between council and the city. We formed a growth committee. The growth committee developed the three main pillars of growth: people, jobs, and growing the tax base. Within that, we developed a roadmap for smart growth. We developed a population growth strategy. Those have been, leading us and pushing us. Within that, we re-examined our approach to economic development. Develop St. John didn't exist 2 years ago. We have a whole new board of directors there. So my point is this group, this council, this committee has driven a entirely different conversation on growth. And someone asked me the other day, who is Percy Wilbur? And I said, well, that's a great question. And I shared, this was one of these great on the side of the street conversations. You've just shared with us the DNA, the background. I love the connection to UMBSJ. I love the entrepreneurial story you shared with us. Hey, you got to put yourself through school. So what can I do? That led to, your summer business, and that led to a business that could supply your landscape company, and that led to acquiring some land behind you that led to a project, and so on and so forth. So Percy, in 10 or 15 years from now, I'm not sure what you're going to be building, but I'm excited. I'm excited for it. But I have had the pleasure to get to know you. We don't know each other well, but I would describe Percy Wilbur as a visionary who gets things done. That's what I love. We need more of that in this city. We have it. We need more of it, and we need to celebrate the Percy Wilburs. So I'm really excited for that. Charlotte Street, let's face reality here, folks. Charlotte Street was heading for the wrecking ball. If this growth committee didn't say we need to take action on dilapidated buildings for all the reasons, then perhaps Charlotte Street wouldn't be up on the picture today as a re-energized, as Sarah Jones said, a re-energized building. The other thing I just want to note very quickly is it is exactly what has been driven through, I would argue, this committee, through to the Heritage Preservation Board, and now through council, to have passed new bylaws where modern and heritage architecture can be married together. And Percy, guess what? Yeah. You've done it. You've showed us in your example here a perfect example of how a Confederation-dated building can be right beside a modern, contemporary building, and everyone loves it. So, we owe you a lot of credit for that piece as well. And I think that, the piece around our city manager chuckled when you said, the only time you run into traffic in St. John is when you hit a red light. And it's kind of true. And we take for granted, I on our last trip in recruiting in Toronto, people came to our recruitment event that were spending a couple of hours in the morning and a couple of hours at night commuting from outside the city where they can afford to live, coming into the city to work. Well, I can tell you, folks, there is much more to life than commuting 4 hours a day, and it's right here in St. John, New Brunswick. So we've got so much ahead of us. And I think, lastly, I want to celebrate what we do on heritage preservation. You've had your hand in it. We have I think one of the best assemblies of heritage protected products in the country. We've invested in it as a city for decades and decades. And I think the CBC owes some credit in particular to your particular upcoming project. I really found it was helpful in the CBC story last week to show just how much had been attempted. And yes, it's sad, but so much had been attempted. And I really appreciate the morning host who said, St. John, there's dozens of buildings in St. John that need your help. So, get your pocketbooks out. I understand the cathedral on Waterloo hasn't even paid for the new roof it's put on yet, and on and on. So I think let's celebrate what we do. I agree with my colleague. We need to save as much heritage as absolutely possible as we move forward. And I want to end, Percy, with your most recent project because it sounds spectacular. I've moved uptown with my wife and Gus in September. We absolutely love it. And I can't believe I'm about to say what I'm about to say, but our cars have become a nuisance. So one other amenity I might ask you to think about is maybe the building has one car down in the basement, and through some creative solution, I can go onto an app, and for $12 or $18 or $25, I can use the car for a couple hours, and then I wouldn't even have to own a car anymore. I could just use the one that the building has.
Yeah.
So
You're not the first one to suggest that.
yeah.
Yeah, apparently they are doing it in the bigger cities.
Yeah.
And you can have 2 or 3 little EV vehicles that if you need to do some scooting around on the weekends,
Yeah,
you
so,
need it.
yeah, so I think you got me at dog washing station, you got me at studio, you got me at decks, you got me at a range of sizes, you got me at walkability. So look, all that to say, Percy, we thank you. You have kept the very strong tradition so far of our Growing in St. John speaker series, if you will. You hit a home run today by coming and sharing your story with us. And on behalf of my committee, council, we're grateful for you investing in St. John. We know it's not always easy, but we're here to partner with you, and we thank you.
I'd like to say one thing I didn't
Please.
emphasize enough on it, and it's so important, is the enthusiasm of mayor and council and staff. Jacqueline Hamilton, Amy Poppenroth, Jacqueline, I forget some of them, I'm not going to say all their names, but the enthusiasm. I took them on a tour of my property when I was finished Charlotte Street. They were just giddy and happy that they had done this, and I was kind of surprised. But the enthusiasm means everything, because if you're going to struggle...
They're like that all the time, Percy.
But if you're going to struggle to
I'm
get
happy.
everything done, you're going to go somewhere else where it's just
Yeah.
easier to do business. But the enthusiasm that you have is spread throughout the council and the staff that really makes it enjoyable, that you're doing the right thing.
Wow.
And it helps, because if you're always being thwarted, that you'll just go to commerces.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I feel like hugging you, Percy, but that's probably inappropriate. So thank you very much for your presentation today, and we really appreciate it, and all the best, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you. Can I have a receipt and file, please? Yep. Okay, all those in favor? And be counted mine. Okay, thank you. And Councillor Armstrong has to step out. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Percy. Okay, so our next item is our immigration survey and succeed and stay presentation. And Mr. Willett, are you introducing? Okay, thank you. And I think you just hit your mic.
Through your worship, David Dovelstein is here to do his presentation, and I just wanted to provide a little bit of context. It was this council, and you mentioned this earlier, Mayor Darling, that it was this council that decided that that focusing and prioritizing population growth was a good idea, and it was a well-informed decision to do that. Soon after, we hired a population growth manager, and David has been doing a great job in that work. About a year ago, we presented that we identified a funding partnership with the federal government and the province of over $500,000 for Succeed and Stay, and that was a good thing. And today, David is going to start sharing with you some of the feedback that has been collected through that initiative, Succeed and Stay, which is just another testament to this idea that council, again, 3 years ago said, I think we should get involved in population growth. We should really prioritize this. This seems to be something that we need to be involved in. And after the presentation that David provides today, I think you'll be reassured that that decision was a wise one, and one that has really hit on something quite important for our community, and that our community is quite receptive to. So with that, David, I leave it to you.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Good afternoon, Growth Committee. So, as Phil mentioned, this project is sort of a year in the making. We're really grateful to our funding partners, the province of New Brunswick and the federal government through ACOA, that are providing funding for Succeed and Stay. What I'm here to talk to you about today is just one of the over a dozen projects that are involved in Succeed and Stay. And so the project that we're talking about today is essentially our research project that we've been conducted, and it's multi-phased. So at the beginning of this year, we've done a tremendous amount of preliminary work and background research trying to find out what other communities in Canada have done similar work on trying to find out why immigrants to a community or new residents succeed and stay. Because that's sort of the impetus of the name. We don't just want people to move here and then move on to Toronto or Vancouver. We want folks who are going to stick around long term and put down roots. So in phase 2, as you may have been aware, we launched the city's first immigrant survey. And I'll talk with you about a few high-level details about that. In phase 3, obviously, the next phase was getting some color, as we would say, to the survey and hearing from immigrants directly in the room through the use of focus groups. We also hired the firm Diversis, who are immigration consultant firm, to help us do an analysis on immigrant serving organizations in Greater St. John. How effective are we as a community in encouraging newcomers to stick around? Are we providing the right services? Are the right services being provided to the right people at the right time? Those are all questions we want to know the answer to. And we're very grateful to have over 25 stakeholder organizations participate in that, and we're just waiting now the final results from that. Phase 4 is now getting into more in-depth interviews with immigrants who view themselves as being successful. They arrived to St. John. They are now contributors. You've heard of some of them at Growth Committee in the past, and there's hundreds more like that. We want to find out, was there something in common to all those experiences? Because if there is, we want to replicate that. We want to ensure that when we're recruiting to places like Toronto or into overseas or other places in the future, we're attracting people who are much more inclined to choose St. John as their home long term. And then finally, the final phase, which we anticipate will begin in spring of this coming year, will be reporting on what we've learned and then having a huge public discussion on what do we need to do as a community to move forward, to become more welcoming and to be more integrated in our approach. So in terms of some of the milestones, obviously, as you're aware, we adopted the city's first population growth strategy in February of 2018. This agreement for Succeed and Stay was adopted just earlier this year. It seems like a very long time, but it was just this year. And then we formalized a research agreement with the University of New Brunswick and St. John in July earlier this year. And so some milestones, we have an advisory committee for the research team that's made up of some of the funding partners, as well as our St. John Local Immigration Partnership, our settlement agencies, economic development agencies, and researchers. We've also assembled an ad hoc research tiger team, as we would say, as the city manager likes to talk about. I'm really pleased to be joined by some of my colleagues today. Dr. Zuan Nguyen is our principal investigator and also the project manager of our local immigration partnership. Dr. Mikkel Hellstrom, who's really involved in investigating that phase 4, interviewing folks who are successful. And then obviously we're joined by our colleague Omar Morad, who I would point out has been nominated for 2 different diversity awards in the last month. And he's only been in St. John for, well, essentially just a year. So to recognize that quickly is phenomenal. The fact that we get to work with them every day and have them upstairs working so closely with our team is a wonderful bonus to the city. So in terms of just the survey, and that's what we're going to talk about today, just sort of what I would say, a preview of coming attractions, because this isn't the full thing yet. So as I mentioned, this was the first of its kind for the city. We had a very coordinated release of the survey. There was a tremendous amount of work going into the preparation of the survey. We met with a lot of other stakeholders. We consulted with stakeholders throughout the country about how best to run a survey for St. John. We had a tremendous amount of support from our partners. We held 5 open houses throughout the city. We used print and social media. And then we also did a lot of personal invitation and snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is, you invite one person and you ask them to invite their friends to fill it out, and their friends invite their friends. And so the immigrant community is very tight-knit in St. John, and as you're going to see, was even more tight-knit than we assumed because the response rate for this was phenomenal. The survey was multilingual. We know from the census that there's a number of speakers of non-official languages, and obviously English and French are official languages, but we knew there was a lot of Mandarin and Arabic speakers, so we wanted to launch sort of a city survey for the first time in non-official languages and see what the uptake was. The uptake was really, really good as well. So over a quarter of our respondents filled it out in either Mandarin or Arabic.
Wow.
So that's a very positive. In terms of how many people participated, so we had over 770 immigrants participate in the survey, which says to me, and I hope it says to you, immigrants are really committed to building a better St. John in St. John. They really want to contribute. They want to readily share their voice, and they weren't afraid to take the time. And this was a long survey, and that was some of the pushback that we got from different stakeholders. It took on average 20 minutes to fill it out, and even longer if you didn't speak one of the 4 languages. And the fact that so many newcomers spent so much of their valuable time to give us feedback, well, we're very, very grateful for that. 520 newcomers actually made it all the way to the end of the survey, which is considerable when you consider there was over 80 questions. And you can see the completion rate. We're hoping to get 300, and obviously we much higher than that. We actually did have a lot more respondents than just the 770. This is what the final result is after cleaning the data and filtering out only for immigrants. Because we had some St. John born residents who also wanted to give their feedback, and we have that information and duplicates and other things like that. So we're fairly confident this is our final number, and we're going to continue to do some analysis. So what are some of the early findings that we've heard? So what's relevant to St. John, obviously, we ask questions about the whole region, because immigrants, well, many of them, and you're going to see most of them here, over 80% move to the city. They also live in our sister communities. So we want to find out about the services that they're receiving there and why they choose to live in the city or not live in the city. As you can see, 96% of the respondents who are under the age of 34 have chosen to live in the city. So that speaks about the value proposition that we have for those age groups. In terms of where they're coming from. And so this is something that really surprised us. Immigrant respondents were from 98 different countries. So that's just a phenomenal good news story for St. John about how multicultural that we are becoming. We've seen our diversity rate double in the past 20 years, but we're seeing it now accelerate even quicker. And this was certainly something that we didn't even suspect looking at the census, because often a lot of that is hidden. But as you can see, and I won't go through the slide, you can see all the percentages of all the different countries. Those were the top 10. And the largest amount, over 35%, are from countries that we couldn't even fit in space on the slide because it would be too large. In terms of languages, there's over 63 different languages that are spoken by the respondents of the survey, including French and English. Right, so 61 other non-official languages, and you can see the ratio there as well. And you can see the acceleration of the growth of immigration to our region, in particular St. John. If you see over 82% are choosing the city, that bodes very well for our community going forward. But 60% of the respondents have arrived in the last 3 years. And just to put a number on that, that's approximately 2,500 permanent residents, which is fantastic for the region, especially if we can keep them all. We can get them finding jobs, get them fully integrated. That also doesn't include, though, the number of temporary workers and students who we also hope to attract to stay long term. And I'll talk to you about that in just a moment. In terms of the education, so this was something that we suspected would be true, but we're really blown away by this. So any semblance that newcomers who come to St. John are not educated is completely false. So over 70% of immigrants to St. John have a university degree or higher. And you can see the numbers are even higher if you also include trade certificates or college. So these are very educated people, for the most part, who are moving here, who are ready to work and can fill jobs very quickly. So it's a wonderful opportunity for employers, especially employers who are struggling to fill workforce needs, that we have a ready and willing workforce essentially coming at our fingertips, and more coming that have these skill sets that our employers are looking for. And now we just as a community have to become more accustomed to hiring people with maybe different experiences or different last names, or maybe a university that's not familiar to us might have the same credentials or same experience. So this is opportunity for us going forward. And in terms of the breakdown of how they arrive, there's well over a dozen streams that newcomers are using to gain entrance to the city. But as you can see, more than half or around half are coming through economic streams. So these are folks who are coming through the Atlantic Immigration Pilot, Provincial Nominee Program, entrepreneur streams. These are folks who would come and start businesses and create jobs, or express entry, essentially the best and the brightest, those with advanced degrees who could speak English or French. So those folks here are very, very job ready day one when they arrive. One other section that I'd like to point out to that is somewhat within our control and presents real opportunity for the community is almost a quarter of immigrants who've chosen to live in the city long term initially came as students. So this says that there is, a net benefit to having UNBSJ attracting international students as well as our community college, and so that we're seeing increases. UNBSJ just announced the new residence, which we assume in large part support more and more immigrant families who are moving and wanting to go to school here. NBCC has rapidly accelerating the amount of international students and international learners that they accept. This bodes very well for the city, and it represents real opportunity for us. So part of the policy implications we'll be looking at long term is how do we ensure that students, international students in particular, will stay here long term after graduation and integrate fully into our community. In terms of some of the most challenging issues, and I would just like to point out, these are very, very high level at this point. We're going to be doing analysis over the next 4 months and really being able to take a deep dive. So, which was no surprise to our research team, but as you can see here, over 40% of respondents are saying the job, finding suitable employment is an issue. It's their number one concern. And so there's some issues here that you would hear about in New York City where you have doctors driving taxi cabs. That's certainly something that we heard in the survey as well. But we want to make sure that we're finding newcomers the right fit for the right job. We don't want overeducated people in positions where they don't need a degree. We want them to find the right spot. So this is still a challenge for our community. It's a challenge for every community in Atlantic Canada and the broader country in general. So that's no surprise, but it's certainly something that gets our attention in terms of how as a community can we move that forward and make that better. One thing that was really interesting to us, which we've heard from a lot of newcomers, but we have data now, is the demand for ethnic groceries. And as I mentioned, we're able to cross-tabulate all these results based on the different variables that we heard in the survey. So there's over 83 questions. We can cross-reference each one. So for example, we can look into see, well, are these the most important priorities for every age group? So for example, as you might suspect, seniors, their number one issue is access to healthcare. Students, though, they're near the top, if not the top issue, is finding ethnic groceries. And I guess if you think about it, it makes sense. It's their first time away from home. They want something that's familiar from home. So of course they're going to look for sort of those comfort foods and tastes of their home country. So these are policy implications that we'll be looking at as a community, and we'll be able to, again, break these down. In terms of some of the most important amenities, and I would just draw caution to this. Don't read too much into this specifically, at least not yet, because there's a lot of data that is not included here yet. But it just sort of gives you a snapshot of what we hope to be able to get to. But at least as you can see, early indications say that newcomers absolutely love our parks and our green spaces. That certainly is one of our value propositions. And it was one of the comments that I remember hearing in one of the focus groups that a newcomer had moved from what they called a concrete jungle to essentially a green paradise surrounded by water. So that's certainly something that our newcomers really appreciate. Obviously, they're still using our malls and shops, and would be no surprise, particularly to our settlement agencies, a lot really find the value in libraries, especially if they're trying to translate documents or get access to computers. The other really interesting thing about all this data, with the help of our GIS team, we're going to be able to geolocate every single response. So we asked a whole lot of satisfaction questions, like how satisfied are you with the city? What are your feelings of wanting to stay in the community? We're able to geolocate those by area, so we can find out if certain neighborhoods are having more issues with certain topics than others. At the same time, though, we know that people gave us their information in confidence, so we'll have to make sure that we protect their confidentiality, because you could really easily find out, Dr. Hellstrom's from Sweden. Not a lot of Swedish people filled out the survey. You might be able to find out, oh, here's what Swedish people think. So we're going to be respecting the respondents' confidentiality, but also being able to make really good policy analysis based on what we heard. Here's one of the really interesting tidbits, and again, this is still very early. Because of the way that we rolled out the survey, we were able to use logic. What that means is we could ask certain questions to certain respondents based on earlier questions that they responded to. So we were able to only ask this question to respondents who either don't live in the city currently or used to live outside the city and have now moved in. So essentially, we're trying to find out, why didn't you choose St. John? What were those main reasons? And obviously you hear from some people, it's the taxes or it's the fog. And as you can see from here, that's actually not what rose to the top. The policy implication that we heard fairly loudly, but we still have to look into this more, is the main reason is because access to essentially the right size of housing. So a lot of families are moving to Canada with bigger houses than we're used to. So that's something that we're going to be looking into.
Bigger families, you mean, David?
Families, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And a lot of newcomers are wanting sort of the newer household, or maybe they've come to Canada with the dream of the white picket fence and they want some of those options. So that's certainly a policy implication. We suspected this might be high. That's why we're going to be working with Develop SJ this coming year on a new housing study just for immigrants, how they move through the community, and find out what do we have to offer as a community, is it meeting their needs, and how do we ensure that we are the most attractive community in southwestern New Brunswick for our immigrant community. So we also asked this question. Now, for this slide, I just filtered it by respondents who currently are living in the city limits. And the question was, do you intend to remain in St. John? So the good news is 60% right off the top said, yes, we do. We want to stay. That bodes very well, considering our retention rates historically have not been as high as we'd like them to be. So this would certainly take us to a whole other threshold. 15% obviously have said no, or close to 16% have said no, they don't intend to. A lot of these people would be students, for instance, where they've come here and they, with the intention of just, I want to get a Western education and then bring it back and build my home country. The interesting note is right obviously in the middle, that 30% who are saying it depends, right? For about a third, it depends on the job, right? If I can find the right job, I'll stick around. The other 2/3, a big chunk are, I just got here less than 3 years ago. I don't know if this is going to be my home yet. So far the indications are good, but we'll wait and see. And others are just, there's a whole variety. And we're going to be able to break those down further with the analysis. So in terms of next steps, as you can see and heard about, we did the survey, we collected all our data. It's quite a big job now to analyze this. There's over 250,000 data points that we now have at our fingertips as a community to really dive deep into. So we're going to be doing a full analysis of this over the next 4 or 5 months, and with the intention of coming back to you and to the community with a full report in the spring of 2020. We will also be getting the results of our gap analysis very shortly from Diversis. We completed our stakeholder engagement. We hosted 11 focus groups with different immigrants, including high school aged immigrants. So we heard from our young newcomers as well on what they love about the city and what they'd want to change, what they see as their future here. And again, we're going to see a full report there as well. So we've just gotten ethics approval for Dr. Hellstrom's project on interviewing successful immigrants who view themselves as successful and who have stayed long term, to find out if we can replicate that. So we're now really just starting that part of the project rolling out. The interview period will be ongoing for the next few months, and we're going to start seeing some early results from that in early spring. And so then final reporting, we're going to be meeting with stakeholders over the winter and the spring. We anticipate that we'll probably be having custom reports for various stakeholders in various departments. We asked a lot of questions on different departments. So for example, we asked questions on St. John Transit. I didn't talk a lot about this today because we're still evaluating, but we'll be able to have customized data sets both from the survey and the focus groups that we can present and say, here's what we've heard. What would you like to do with this as an organization? We're also going to bring a lot of this information to the public to discuss, and how can we as a community improve outcomes for newcomers. We'll release the reports in the spring, and then we're planning to host sort of a large summit where we get the whole community together and really talk about this issue as a community. Bring it to the forefront in even a more pronounced way than it is now. And then start talking about the next strategy. What's our strategy going forward for the next 5 years once the framework is wrapped up in 2021? So I'll just skip through this slide and I'll take any questions.
Okay, that's a lot of information, David. Well done. Thank you. And I know you have, could you, I think everyone knows, but I know you have Ms. Walshutz here as well
Yes.
with us. So hello
Jennifer's working on a number of
Jennifer
other
as well.
projects
So,
as well. Yeah.
okay, thank you. Councillor Hickey, first up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks very much, David. Pretty exciting news. And I guess my question really is, I know that one of our main issues has always been around retention. What do you think's changed? What's changed that number around?
So there's a couple factors, and admittedly, we're still a little in the dark. Like, the retention is a lagging indicator. So Statistics Canada releases information on retention rates, and the one that we're very interested in is 5-year retention rates, because that really seems to indicate from the literature that those are the folks who are going to stick around long term. So the province, obviously, in their new population growth strategy, talked about a 1-year retention rate increase, and that's well and good for the city. But again, we want that long-term stickiness factor. The most recent data we have is from 2011. So we want something a lot more recent. A lot has changed since then. So we've seen new programs like the Atlantic Immigration Pilot. So in the past, immigrants were invited to come to Canada with education, but maybe they didn't have a job offer.
Right.
And so what we've seen, early indications for example, from the survey are that the unemployment rates seem to be lowest for those in that pilot, which seems to say that it is working. We're also seeing a lot more influx of immigrants. So the highest number of immigrants in recent memory coming to our community, and it creates sort of a stickiness factor. Right? So we have almost 24 ethnocultural groups now in various stages of formation. So if you're coming from Somalia, you don't necessarily have to go to Toronto anymore to find a Somali community. You could find one here in St. John. So, and then as greater awareness happens with employers who recognize that the talents and the skills that these newcomers bring are just as valued and valuable as, you know, Canadian-born residents. I think all those things are happening, and we're, as a community, we're really turning the corner, and we're going to start seeing increased retention for those reasons. It's still a tipping point. We could go, you know, the wrong way if we were neglectful, but if we can continue to push the value that newcomers bring and continue to invite them here and to stay, I'm confident that more and more will continue to stay.
Yeah, well, I think that answers my next question, because it was how do we deal with that employment suitability factor? And I think that is just the core element of, as more and more, as our diversity continues to grow, the more suitable employment becomes, I would suspect.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess, quick question for Jennifer, if I can. How does that retention change when it comes from, and obviously your background is perfect for this, when it comes to students in St. John?
I can definitely answer that. For UNB St. John, having work terms and internships in all of the faculties now is a massive change. It used to be just in business and engineering
Right.
and things like that, computer science. So now even arts is having a work term or an internship. 80% of those employers that have a student as an intern or for a work term are hiring those students full-time for their life job. So those jobs are being retained, and those students and those employers are pleased, and it's a perfect match. So that's a huge help. And also to add on to what David was saying about families coming and staying, we're now also seeing family members sponsoring privately other family members. So when we all worked with the refugee crisis that happened, those refugees that have now been here and living here for 3 and 4 years are now privately sponsoring brothers, sisters, parents, which is now bringing sometimes up to 20 people
Amazing.
for one
Yeah.
family. So
Yeah.
that's a massive retention as well. And there are many other initiatives, things like Stay and Grow, which are events that happen in the city, and just the collaborations, people being so kind and friendly and welcoming, inviting people for dinner at their house or including people in things, and all the events that happen in the city and people attending, and that's creating all that community and friendship that people want and need. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you. And it seems to me that this is exactly the mindset we need to be in if this is in order to be focused on diversity. Because as everyone tells us, you know, the best path to growth for our city is through immigration, because we need more people here, and that's and it's pretty clearly happening. So hopefully that continues. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor?
Well, thank you, Worship. Well, David, I think you're on the right track. You're doing all the right steps. I think a few years ago, I remember when we had a session and the province said, you know, the city's got to be more open, and the city council and people at the city hall have to be more welcoming to bring immigrants in and to include them in the communities, and especially in our city. And I think that has happened greatly in the last number of years, where you've invited them to go to different activities, and they feel that the city is reaching out and wants them, and I think that's so important to how they feel and why they stay here. The other issue I want to make is that I think a big thank you has to go out to our local employers. You know, if you drive around the city or you go to different businesses in St. John, regardless of what area it's in, you'll see a lot of immigrants working, you know, in retail business, in the banking business, and it's nice to see them there because they are now being hired by our local employers. And a few years ago, we didn't have that willingness for people to reach out and to employ people that are not necessarily from St. John locally. So I think that's good, and they're learning new skills, and they're becoming part of the community, because in order to have a successful life, you know, most young people want a job and they want to be independent. So if you move to a new city, you want to be included, but in that, you have to have a job. That's the most important thing. So regardless of your age, you want a job and you want to feel included and you want people to recognize you. So I think, all of the work of all the agencies together has helped make that happen in St. John, and it's more and more active here now than it was before. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor McKenzie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, David, Jennifer, Omar, and Zuan, you guys really need to be congratulated. I really had no idea how much of an effect a good team put together could have on growing St. John. And I'm really glad that Christine's here from Develop SJ, because one of the interesting slides that I find is this in the survey is which of the following factors greatly influence your decision to live in one of the outlying communities. Okay, and for example, the first one's 31%, almost 32% availability of housing that met my needs. Now we need to know what the needs are. Once we find out what those needs are, developers can start developing to the need, right? So I don't know if you have those details in this survey, but that would be something that you could collaborate with Develop SJ and they in turn with the developers, because this, as we heard from Percy Wilbur, the city is really starting to grow in terms of developments all over the place. And now we need to start focusing on the needs of people that want to come into the city but can only find their, proper housing outside. So congratulations to all of you. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So just to finish up, thank you very much, David, to you and the team. Again, I'm being a bit repetitive, but I mean, it has been a core focus of this committee of council from day one. It's in the growth pillar. It's critical. We developed a population growth strategy, which has driven our focus, and it's a tremendous opportunity. We have been talking about the need for 110 to 120,000 new immigrants, or whether that's interprovincial or international immigration to New Brunswick in the next 15 to 20 years. So the question for me becomes committee and city and staff and community. How many of those 120,000 people do we want to attract? Are we being bold enough? Are we being urgent enough? In between 1845 and 1847, for different reasons, over 30,000 people came to St. John. So if we can do that in 1845, can we do that in 2025, 2028, between 2020 and 2030? So that's the bigger discussion that we're having, I believe, in this region, is how do we grow and thrive and get in rowing in the same direction. And to me, again, I'm always going to push. Like I want 30,000 of those folks to come here. We're laying the groundwork. The survey, the information you've pulled together so far is fascinating. So I'm really thrilled with the work that you're doing. I do have, I guess, some rapid fire, commentary for your group to continue to think about. I'm really interested in the top issues, David. And I guess what I'm more interested in is what are the strategies to address those? Because, when I'm out and about and having, so I'm not surprised, for example, employment is at the top of the list. And I guess I'd say, what are the strategies that we're deploying as a group to address those? And I guess I'd ask you a question, David. What is the message that, is there a message that we need to send to employers? So I agree with the deputy. There's much to celebrate. But I also, I'm having some discussions with newcomers who are trying to satisfy that number one objective of getting a job, no different than anyone else, and they're struggling there a bit. So I just ask you to take it away, and what do we need to do with urgency to address those? Pick the top three, those top three issues that you've identified, because in terms of flight risk, I would think it's, it's employment. It's like, so That's the piece. And what is the message we need to deliver? And I guess with boldness, let's celebrate what's working well. And with boldness, let's tackle those issues that we're all talking about, but that we need to make sure are addressed. So, I'll give you an example. Our employers, I'm hearing in any given conversation, we cannot find enough people. We need talent. And everywhere I go, I find and meet amazing people who have incredible talent. So what's the gap? Do we know the gap, David, between that gap between the need and the talent? And if not, how do we address that, for example?
So that's a very complicated question.
Okay.
In summary, I'll try to keep it as short and simple as possible. We're getting more and more data on the types of jobs that are available in the region. The province has released forecasts of where the jobs are going to be for the next 10 years. We're now working to try to find out what that is just in St. John locally. But a lot of the issue here too comes down to making sure that the skills match and making sure that the education programs are training the workforce of the future. So that's certainly one aspect. But also in terms of newcomers, there are some aspects. Yes, they are highly educated. Many cases they're job ready. It means demonstrating that to employers, the value that these newcomers are bringing. It's not something that a lot of employers locally are used to yet. There's still a lot of myths about hiring immigrants in St. John. A lot of employers think it's either very difficult or time-consuming, or they're going to be very disruptive to the workforce. And certainly one of the things that we would tell employers when you hire a newcomer, they're going to completely, radically change your way of business for the better. We've hired newcomers at City Hall that have had transformative effects on our teams. If you want to see increases in productivity and revenue, hire a newcomer. And I have data to back this up. But the other aspect, obviously, is we want to make sure that newcomers who are moving here can learn language fluently enough to really get work. And that's certainly a piece that we've heard in the survey and from employers to make sure that there is the right match there. But the other aspect is we do want to make it easier for employers to recognize the skill set that immigrants have. So it is a challenge. So for example, if you're looking at a university in China or in the Middle East, you're like, well, how do I verify that that's a real university? Those are legitimate questions that employers have, but other communities have figured this out. And in many cases, they don't have to travel across the world to find newcomers. In bigger centers like Toronto, Vancouver, they can literally hire immigrants off the street who have applied. So that's certainly something that we're starting to see more and more. We're getting more of a critical mass of immigrants who are just living here, and there'll be more and more of a pool for employers to pull from. So the other aspect is there still is a case here where networking is so important, and a lot of employers will still make hiring decisions based on who they know or who they trust. And we're now trying to shift as a community to hiring in a large part based on skills and based on education. And it shouldn't matter what the top of the name of the resume is, or it shouldn't matter whether you know their uncle or their brother. If they're the right fit, you should hire them, right? So these are some conversations we need to have as a community, and we are having, and we're growing slowly in that direction. But I don't know if that completely answers your question.
I think, just to finish up, I'd say you said, in many ways, you said a number of things I'm thinking to wrap up. Number one, again, just we were not having these conversations just a few short years ago. We were having them at a very high level. Now we're acting. There's work happening. There's real data. It's informing us. It's driving our actions. So thank you for that. Urgency always needs to be urgent to work. If we can do something in the fall instead of the spring, we should do it now. Like, how do we move that forward? Replication. If there's best practices in other communities that we can pull ahead and we can learn from, I think that's great. And I know we're doing that as well. So I think that's exceptional. I think the city of St. John, to put you on the spot, city manager should lead. I believe if we don't have today, we should have a diversity policy. We should be hiring new immigrants. We should be the hub for co-op placements with NBCC and UMB. So I'll leave that with you to think about. I understand we're working through some restructuring, but it may also be an opportunity to leverage some tremendous brain trusts that are just happy to have the work experience. So I think we should lead by example there. And I think that this is another example of thinking, planning, acting, measuring long term. you know, having a plan, putting really solid data behind it, and follow the plan. So I'm thrilled. This is another exceptional presentation today, and I think it shows some real action and outcomes. And I think to the deputy's comments earlier, any advice somebody gave us a couple of years ago about our diversity, boy, the St. John, I'm not sure what you think St. John is. St. John is an incredibly diverse. I attended a holiday celebration on Friday night. The diversity in our community is absolutely incredible. And lastly, Omar has promised me that he's not going to take the mayor's job from me in May of 2020, but there's no promises for May of 24. And if you think I'm kidding, I'm not. If you haven't, you don't know Omar. But thank you very much for the presentation today. To the team, exceptional work. Let's keep the pedal to the floor. Thank you. Okay, receive and file, please, council or committee. Thank you. All those in favor? Anybody contrary minded? No one. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, David. Okay, next item is our growth committee schedule. Mr. Ouellette, are you? It's not much debate, I don't think, but does anyone have debate on the growth committee schedule for 2020? Thank you. And there's 3 of us in the room, so I think we can vote. Okay, seconded. Sir, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye, I get to vote. Nay? Okay, unanimous vote. Thank you. Okay. How many of us are there? 5? Okay, so we'll put it back on the next agenda, but I'm not sure which other one. Yes, please. Okay, thank you. Next item is our process improvements for infrastructure. Ms. Hamilton, are you going to introduce that? Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship, members of the committee. So this afternoon you're going to...
Oh, sorry, Jacqueline, hold on. Yeah, you just hit it yourself. There you go.
Yes, members of committee, this afternoon you're going to receive two briefings on our department's progress towards customer service improvement. These efforts are aimed at moving the needle on growth. We have been working over the past number of months in collaboration with Develop SJ on a number of improvements to the one-stop development shop. First of all, you're going to hear from Mr. Chris McNeil, our technical services engineer, who's going to showcase a major infrastructure process improvement project that was identified as a key pain point when we engaged with our local clients. And he will be followed by a presentation by Ms. Rachel Van Wart, a manager of customer service, who is going to share with you the early results of a pilot project on our solutions-oriented customer service that's already yielding significant progress. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chris.
Okay. Good morning, Your Worship and members of the Growth Committee. Today I'm very excited to talk to you about the infrastructure development project. So we've been working hard over the past few months to bring the project to this point. Last night at Council, you heard one of the service improvements of this project, providing infrastructure information to consultants and developers, but there's approximately 20 other service improvements associated with this project, which I'll highlight a few of them today. The infrastructure development project was created earlier this year. Developer and consultant sessions were held in February to get feedback on development challenges in St. John. In August, some of the early highlights of the project were communicated to the Growth Committee through a brief customer service update. Several interviews were conducted with staff from Moncton, Fredericton, Quispamsis, Rothesay, Halifax, and Calgary in order to gather information on what they're doing in terms of best practices. And so we gathered a lot of information and also on their challenges and how they're overcoming them. Moncton, a great takeaway that we got from it was that Moncton had actually offered for us to use some of their content from the development manuals and manuals that they've created in order to help with the development process. So that was a huge win for the project. So following the research phase of the project, we developed strategic improvements to address key issues. Throughout the the development of some of the service improvements, we sought feedback from consultants to ensure that the overall objective was being met. For example, we heard feedback from consultants about our initiative on example drawings and how it may not be quite as impactful as having clear, defined requirements and checklists. So we were able to readjust and make sure that the limited resources that we had were focused on the most impactful service improvements. Overall, we developed approximately 20 service improvements. Each of these service improvements falls under 3 main categories to ensure that we're working towards the overall goal of the project. Clear and predictable requirements, improved communication, and customer-focused service improvements. The Infrastructure Development Manual is by far the biggest deliverable of this project. The goal of this manual is to have everything that you need to get an approval clearly outlined all in one document. We heard feedback from developers that they were told by consultants back in the initial sessions not to mention a traffic impact study because then they'll probably be made to do it. So that was one of the main things we wanted: clear requirements, when things apply, when they don't, so that it's all outlined, it's all right there. As you can see, there are 4 service improvements that are heavily rooted in the creation of the development manual. Developers, so the first area of service improvements of the 3 is clear and predictable requirements. So developers and consultants need to know all of the requirements early on as opposed to being surprised by requirements later on. Most of the service improvements in this category are directly related to the Infrastructure Development Manual. So I'll just list a few of these off. Development and traffic impact study requirements, development of the water and sewer modeling requirements, development of design briefs, engineering letters, and engineering drawing requirements, consultant complete submission checklists, phased foundation permits, and consultant design examples. So the next category is improved communication. So this is making sure that we're clearly communicating all of our requirements and that we're open to hearing feedback regularly. So some of these service improvements include Infrastructure 101 course for developers, an annual developer feedback session, an annual consultant feedback session, revised drawing resubmission forms, and providing water and sewer maps and data to consultants, which is what we heard last night. The last category is customer-focused service or process improvements. Essentially, this is addressing the behind-the-scenes process challenges that can impact development and development approvals. So these include things like early development applications, electronic plans review, adding comments to approved plans, standardized review of drawings and engineered reports, establishing an electronic filing system for projects, reviewing lot grading requirements to reduce barriers, listing unique solutions for known design and construction challenges, putting time limits on capacity reservation for proposed developments, and resolving common infrastructure compliance issues. So in terms of next steps, so up until now, we've been able to move this project forward using only internal resources. The creation of the development manual is too important and too large of an initiative not to have an additional support. So Develop SJ and Growth and Community Development Services have put out an expression of interest to consulting firms, and we've hired Dillon Consulting to help us with the creation of this manual. We're hoping to have a draft ready for comments from the development community by the end of February 2020. So that's our goal. Implementation, the next one is implementation of full electronic plans review. So full implementation was completed in early December of this year. Prior to that, it was in the infrastructure review process, it was primarily paper reviews. So the engineer was actually plotting out drawings, putting their comments on manually, rescanning the drawings, and sending them back to consultants. So now it's all done electronically. It comes in, they put their comments on, they email it back. So a lot simpler process. The next one is providing infrastructure, water, and sewer mapping to consultants, which we went into detail last night. Putting a time limit on capacity reservation in our system. So this is for potential developments. So currently there's no limitation on reserving capacity for approved developments. So developments could be on the books for years and never happen, and they could impede completely viable projects from moving forward just because of the limitations on capacity. So the full rollout of that initiative is planned for January 2020. And next is phased foundation permits. So this is formalizing the current process that we have for phasing building permits. And full rollout is anticipated to be February 2020. Next is the annual developer and consultant feedback sessions, and we're planning on holding those in February 2020 once we have more to discuss, more rolled out on this project. Early development applications. This is formalizing planning and infrastructure reviews prior to an formal application being received. So we can review part of the application and get them going on their engineering approvals first. Reviewing lot grading requirements to reduce barriers. So this initiative is to revisit these requirements and to see if any improvements can be made in the process in order to make it more developer friendly. So lastly, I'd like to thank Develop SJ and St. John Water for their support on this project, and also the Growth Committee for supporting important initiatives like these to help promote growth and development in St. John. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. Great presentation. A lot of detail there. Questions, comments, colleagues? Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. This is exceptional. You know, I look at this and I'm thinking, well, what did we do before this? You know what I mean? Because it's everything. You know, if we had this in 2000, we wouldn't be in the shape we're in now. So it's exceptional work. Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for really, I don't know how to say it. It's like, you know, you're looking at it through eyes from a developer now. You know, what would I want to see if I went into the city as a developer? And all this stuff, it's really hitting the nail on the head. You know, and I know, I mean, I know Percy Wilbur, I deal with developers, and they're saying there's a big difference, you know, between the one-stop development shop and Develop SJ is making a huge difference. You know, they are coaching, encouraging, and it's like Percy said about council and the mayor, you know, staff and council is so encouraging of development now. It makes it so easy. So stuff like this is just going to propel that. So thanks very much.
Yeah, great comments. Thank you. Councillor Hickey, you know?
Nothing, just
okay.
Echoing Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you very much. Again, it's a big, this is the kind of work that really, really matters. You know, coming from the industry, these are tangible examples of making it easier to work within the city. And the fact that you have, as a team, heard the feedback, taken action, implemented annual, you know, gatherings to hear that feedback, changing manuals. I hope that we're not producing a big manual. I hope it's an online manual, but we'll let you figure out how you produce that, and so that it can be, you know, easily updated and seamlessly updated. But these are great examples of listening, taking action, making it easier to do business. And at the end of the day, this is what entrepreneurs and you know, builders and consultants want. They want to work with a group that clearly wants to make it easy to do business and is committed to on an ongoing basis. This is continuous improvement at work, because what I'm hearing here today is we met, we heard your feedback, we're making things better, easier to do business in St. John, and we're committed to continuing to do that, to stay in those conversations, and here's how we're going to do it. It's a day of home runs today, and we're hearing evidence now of and frankly, I don't believe we were terrible before, not by any means having come from the industry, but what we're seeing now is we're seeing a renewed momentum and optimism translating to projects. The spring of 2020 is going to be very exciting in St. John. There's projects in all sides of the city, and you know, again, I think the team, the internal growth and community development, Develop St. John team, is to be congratulated, because the actions you're taking are working. So, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Develop SJ has come up with a solution to have it as online, easily
I knew it.
updated, and so that is the plan.
Yeah, it's just because it's seamless, right? If you then take page 212 out and put a new page in, it's updated and it's seamless, and yeah, I mean, that's the era,
Exactly.
and it's green and environmentally sensitive. So thank you. Okay, well, I don't think we can even vote. We don't have quorum anymore, so we'll just say thank you. We'll say thank you. Okay, we'll receive and file. Sure. Thank you. All those in favor? Nay? Okay, nay for me. Thank you. Okay, and next up is, okay, another fantastic presentation. Ms. Hamilton, will you introduce that again, or you're?
I already did.
You already did?
Yeah, so.
Well, but it was so good, I thought we would do it again. Okay, thank you. Miss Van Wart, nice to see you today, and we'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to present to the Growth Committee this afternoon. I had a similar presentation at Council last evening, so I'll try to make it fairly brief, but hit the high points. That's right. So as reported and presented to the Common Council last evening, the Proactive Solutions Approach to Problem Solving, otherwise known as PSAPS project, is one of numerous customer service enhancements underway within the One Stop Development Shop. Together with Develop St. John, we've worked to foster a customer-centric culture by reducing barriers, incentivizing growth, and improving processes to reduce red tape. The PSAPS project specifically focused on addressing time, risk, and communication. So to measure project effectiveness, we completed pre- and post-surveys were conducted for developers and staff, and I'm pleased to share that developers and consultants reported a 20% improvement in their overall service experience in a short 4-month period. In addition, staff reported a 17% increase in improved service delivery. This significant achievement in a short period of time demonstrates staff commitment to customer service excellence and continuous improvement. I've also included a few testimonials and some feedback from developers and consultants. We've received extremely positive feedback to celebrate, but also to note that we still have work to do. So we're going to continue to engage with our customers through the customer engagement sessions, as Chris noted, in 2020, and improve our service delivery. So we're not going to stop now. In conclusion, these preliminary results are a significant achievement to celebrate, especially given Growth Committee's leadership, strategic direction, and support in growing the city and improving our customer experience. The PSAPS project will have numerous next steps in 2020 as we continue to move the dial on customer service excellence to support smart growth, and we look forward to sharing further success with the committee in the near future. While I'm here, I'm also pleased to introduce Ben Purinton, who's with us this afternoon. Ben is a recent engineering graduate and our new vacant building program manager. We're excited to have Ben join the team and continue the program's positive momentum in 2020 to address dangerous buildings and that compromise the safety and quality of life of our citizens. So please provide a warm welcome to Ben. It's just his second day, so take it easy on him. So I'll now take any questions or comments on some of the survey results, if you have any.
Can you just go back? Yeah, thank you. You
Your favorite
put it up.
slide.
Yeah, it's my favorite slide there. So, okay, questions, comments, colleagues? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Hickey. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say,
Oh, okay.
this is exactly, backs up what we just talked about in the previous one. You know, this is a whole different outlook on the way we're doing business in St. John now. You know, it's really refreshing, and to get this kind of feedback, you know, 20% improvement, like that's amazing. So keep up the good work.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly echoing the same as Councillor McKenzie, and just saying that, you know, 20% is a lot over such a quick period of time. It's nice to be able to have that improvement. Hopefully, it's something that we continue. A little disappointing on the state of things before, but that's okay. We're moving ahead and really becoming the city to develop in, which is really important for our growth. Thank you.
Yeah, so I echo. I think it's amazing, you know, what can happen when we focus in an area. We're you know, the city manager is come with a new attention to culture. You know, growth is one of our critical pillars. We talk about it. We work on it every single day. The teams are fully committed. Always been here, in my view, to serve citizens, but it's getting more complex as well. So I think with purpose and with intent, Mr. Ouellette would say with intentionality, we're having important conversations. We're courageous enough to say, how are we doing? What do we need to improve on? I mean, that's what the best companies in the world do, and that's exactly what this organization is doing. So, you know, again, this isn't about sort of, you know, throwing, you know, parties for ourselves, and if there was confetti, we should have had confetti today. But it's about taking real action and having real focus here on enhancing culture, and improving and working in a complex world. It's complex. So what this is proving to us is that the more we extend out our hands to be true partners with those that want to, in this case, develop and build or move here, as we've heard today, the more we have those dialogues and we take action, the more success we're going to have. And I think we're seeing some payback here, early days, some payback on this area of focus. And so I'm thrilled. You know, council and committee are around to set policy. None of this happens without our amazing staff team. So I want to say thank you to Growth and Community Development, to Develop St. John, to all the teams. And these are the types of investments that we're making that the entire region of Greater St. John benefits. We're in the rooms, we're in the committee rooms, we're writing the visionary documents, population growth that was just proven a few minutes ago. We're investing millions and millions and millions of dollars for St. John and for the greater region of St. John to benefit. So I'm optimistic that we're going to come together as a greater region and grow and thrive and come up with a formula of equitability that hasn't existed. But for today, this is you're all to be commended. This has really been an exciting day. There should be next growth committee meeting should be at the Imperial Theatre, so we can sell it out with citizens watching all the great work. So, thank you very much. I'm not kidding, but he was kidding. No, I wasn't. I'm not kidding. No, I'm not kidding.
He was kidding.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We don't have quorum, so we can't even vote. Yeah.
1 minute we do, 1 minute we don't.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Van Ward. And look, if there's anything coming up in the month of December for you, we wish you all the best. And happy holidays, Merry Christmas.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it. Great. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to all the staff. Welcome, Ben, on your second day. And we look forward to an exciting 2020. We have a lot ahead of us. So
Last 2019 council meeting.
It is, unless we want to call a special one for tomorrow. Okay, thank you. Well, we'll adjourn, and thank you very much, everyone.
Oh, Friday? Yeah, I think I can make that one. Would love to bring Fred. Yes, yeah, that'd be great. I would have loved to pick you up on the other office, but we're having a family tradition.
No, it's Very close to Christmas. Oh, yeah. I'm finally getting my own act together for Christmas.
Can I speak to you for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
All three? Ben, you're probably going to have to, with the little guy.
I'm wondering if I can get an update on 24 Wellesley Avenue and 86 Okay. I just got a text message.
Yeah, I'll get it, get you an update. If you can send me that, and I'll just forward it on.
So 2 to 4 Wellesley and 88 Lansdowne, was it?
86, 88 Lansdowne. Normally I'd send an email, but she texted me, and I'm not very savvy.
Yeah, I'll definitely get you that.
Okay, that'd be great, then I'll pass this on. And if I don't see you guys,
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Doing a great
Great job, David.
Me too.
Oh, awesome.